In this lesson, we'll begin the process of texturing our forest creature by using the clone stamp tool to add some base skin. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we have the sketch that we're going to be working on throughout the duration of this course. And basically, we're going to be layering on a lot of different types of textures onto our sketch here. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, using textures can not only save you a lot of time in having to paint in a lot of meticulous little details, but it can also really give your character or your concept just a lot more personality and dimension. And so what we have here is just a very quick grayscale sketch of what will ultimately be kind of a forest creature, so some sort of mythological, fantasy-oriented forest creature. And my ultimate goal here is just to have a lot of earth-like textures incorporated into the entire bust of our character here. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and you'll notice over here in our layers panel that we have a group which I've created, and I've titled it texture blocking. So over the next several lessons, we're basically just going to be blocking in textures. Now we're going to be doing this all in grayscale. Now this isn't the be-all end-all way to add textures to your concept, whatever that may be. I like to kind of work in grayscale sometimes just so I can really focus on getting all my values, all my lights and my darks the way I want them to be, and without having any of the distraction of color. And you're going to find some of these different textures we pull in, they're going to be, of different values as we bring them in grayscale. So within this group, we're going to have additional groups, and we're going to start off just by focusing on giving him just some skin, all right? So here within this group, we have our layer for our sketch, and then we have a group titled Skin. So within this group, let's go ahead and come down to the bottom of our layers panel, and let's create a new layer. All right. So it's on this layer that we're going to start adding a base skin, just basically cloning in some texture using our clone stamp tool right here. Now, before I do this, I do want to come over here to our sketch, and I'm just going to right-click, and I'm going to go to where it says Select Pixels. So as you can see, everything that composes our sketch has been selected. So what I want to do now that I've selected all the pixels is come down here to the bottom, and you'll notice this little bitty rectangle with a circle inside, and we want to go ahead and click on that, and that basically creates a layer mask. So anything we do basically from this point on will be confined to our sketch. We don't have to worry about it overlapping the outer edges of our sketch here, and just kind of keeps us from being distracted. Now I do want to take this layer mask, and I'm going to hold down Alt and just drag this up to our layer within our skin group, so we can copy that layer mask as we move forward. Okay, so let's go ahead and have a look now at some of the different textures that I'd like to use blocking in his skin. All right, so here we have kind of a concrete texture, and I think this would make a great texture to just kind of give him a base skin to start with, all right? And so if we kind of zoom in here, we can see that there's just a lot of roughness about this texture. We got a few cracks in here, and there, and just a lot of variation in the overall texture itself. We just got a lot of these little bitty kind of pebbly-like areas of the entire texture, and that's going to really be nice, again, just for a base skin. So what we're going to go ahead and do is kind of minimize this window down just a little bit here. All right. And coming back to our window over here, we'll just go ahead and kind of zoom in and kind of get repositioned here just a little bit. So we've got our clone stamp tool already selected over here in our tool panel, okay? So what I want to do is just anywhere on my canvas here, let's go ahead and right click, and I'm just going to go with this soft round brush, and these are just the default brushes that come with Photoshop. So I'm just going to select this soft round brush and just bring up the size quite a bit. So I'm going with the soft round brush because we won't have any hard edges as we clone in this texture. So now that we have our brush selected for our clone stamp tool, over here in our window containing our concrete texture, I'm just going to hold down Alt. and we can just sample from any one area, and if we hover back over our image, we can kind of see a representation of that texture that is going to be basically cloned over from this image to our sketch. All right. And so basically that's what the clone stamp tool does, is it clones information directly from one source to another where you're applying it. Now before I start painting this texture on, we want to go ahead and change our blend mode. In fact, if I just go ahead and paint it on, you can see that it's covering up our sketch, and we really don't want to do that. We want to kind of weave it into our sketch, okay? So we're going to come back here to our layer where we're adding in this concrete texture, and you can see right here in our layers panel where it says normal. So on this layer, we're going to go to normal, and these are all of our blend modes for the layer that we're on. And I'm just going to come down about halfway, and we're going to go with overlay. And you're going to find that overlay, soft light, work very well in a lot of these instances where we're trying to kind of weave in and paint in some of these textures. So we can see kind of how overlay basically works that in. We're not covering up any of the values of our sketch. Okay, so now we can just kind of start to paint in some of that texture, and periodically we'll want to come back over here to our image, and we may want to just resample just from time to time from different areas, just so we don't have to worry about getting a lot of repetitive patterns showing up, which can be the case at times. So again, this soft round brush kind of allows us to weave in this texture without seeing any hard edges showing up as we paint with it. And of course, we can be very cavalier with just kind of how we apply this texture on our sketch here, because we got a layer mask enabled, so we don't have to worry about going outside our subject here of our forest dwelling creature. Now you will notice sometimes you will get a hard edge despite the fact of having a soft round brush, just because as you move around, you also want to think of your cursor as moving around on this image as well, and at some point you may hit the edge. And so again, that's another reason just to come back over here and kind of resample. And we're just kind of blocking in again just some base skin. And we'll kind of come around here just kind of below his jaw. I kind of have a nasty bulbous kind of area of skin right here that I also want to include. So again, just kind of continuing to resample just from some different areas here. You'll notice I was starting to get kind of a very hard edge right there, just from the edge of the image again that we're sampling from. Okay, cool. And let's go ahead and navigate. May want to get his chin as well. So again, this concrete texture I think is going to make for a great just base skin to get started with, and now we can start adding in additional textures to really build upon it. So I'm just kind of navigating around here. Let's go ahead and hit his ear as well. Okay, great. Now let's go ahead and make a new layer. And since we've made a new layer, we're also going to want to hold down Alt and just copy up that layer mask. And let's explore adding another type of texture. So here we have another concrete texture, and this just has a lot of really cool cracks just all through it, very prominent cracks just throughout the entire texture. And so this is going to be really nice to work in. Now, one thing I would like to point out, especially with this texture, is you'll notice that I've rotated it to where the light source loosely matches the light source of the image that we're working on, okay? So that's something you want to keep in mind, is trying to basically match up your light sources as we start to clone in this information. If our shadows are on the opposite side and we're trying to work it in here to where we basically have two competing light sources, it may look a little bit odd. So you'll notice just from looking at our texture here, the light is coming from over here in a similar direction as the light that's hitting our forest creature sketch. So just something to think about in that regard. So again, I'm just going to kind of sample from our texture there. And we'll just kind of start to work in some additional texture. Now you'll notice again it's covering up everything that we've already put down, that initial texture. So let's go ahead and try overlay once again for this layer. And you can see how it starts to weave that in without losing all that information below. So we don't want to cover up anything at this point. Now later on in the course, we're going to explore some other ways to basically bring in textures. We're not always going to paint or clone from image to image. We may find that we need a very specific way that our texture is placed, and so we may kind of explore just some other options in that regard. So I'm just kind of jumping in between these two here, continuing to sample from our cracked texture, and just kind of working in a few more cracked skin on our subject here. And so again, I'm kind of thinking of him as just like this forest-dwelling creature, probably very aggressive, just given the facial expression that I've given him. But as I work in these additional textures, I'm kind of thinking of a backstory. What does this character do? Where does it exist? Obviously in some sort of jungle environment, perhaps, or a forest. So we started to kind of work in some additional cracks over here. Let's go ahead and make one more layer here. Again, copying up our layer mask. And let's explore another texture. So this image of some coral. And you'll notice just how there's a lot of these little pits within this texture. It's very interesting texture. And I think this might be nice to work into our skin. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and hold down Alt with my clone stamp tool and just kind of sample some of that information. And we'll just kind of come over here and work that in. Now I do want to be careful not to be on the wrong layer. So jumping up here to our new layer, and then we'll go to Overlay. And there you have it, just starting to work in some of that interesting texture. Now, as you add textures in, it's very easy to get carried away, adding too much. And so sometimes you have to rein yourself in. Subtlety is a big part of it. So I'm just kind of examining kind of everything we've added so far. And if there's anything that's looking a little bit intense, we could always take our eraser tool, grabbing a soft round brush. I'm going to come over here to my brush panel, enable transfer. And within transfer, I'm turning on both the controls for opacity and flow to pen pressure, since I'm using a Wacom stylus. And so on this layer, I'm just kind of erasing away just a little bit of that texture I added in. We can also play around with our opacity as well, if we want to just kind of play around with how we weave that texture in. So coming back to our clone stamp tool here, just kind of continuing to sample, kind of just thinking about some different areas I may want to just add a little bit more variation just into the skin here. Let's go ahead and make one final layer for our skin group here. And we've got one more texture here I'd like to go ahead and incorporate. And this is a stone texture. And this is a really cool texture. And you'll notice how there's kind of these veiny cracks all throughout the stone. And so you guessed it, I'd like to use some of this to incorporate maybe just some veins here in the skin. So we're going to go ahead and just once again using our clone stamp tool, I'm going to sample from right here where we just have just some really prominent looking kind of veiny texture happening. Coming back over here to our sketch, I want to make sure we're on the right layer, and we'll change our blend mode to overlay. And so I'd like to kind of have just some veins kind of right here on this kind of bulbous area of skin, kind of this bulbous sack of skin right there. In fact, we may want to size our brush up just a little bit more. And just kind of painting that in right there. Very cool. Really liking how that's looking. So in between lessons, we'll kind of continue on. I'll continue on really kind of refining the placement of these different skin textures. In the next lesson, we're going to focus on the horns and how we can add some really interesting wood texture to really give these horns just a lot more dimension and personality. So stick around and we'll see you in the next lesson.